Hello there and welcome to part 4 of my series of videos about the 12 archetypes in the Wheel of Life. And these are the 12 elemental archetypes which were developed as a system by Analog, who was known at the time as Tamao de Jong, along with Barry Slater and Kenneth Carter. And these it was a system which was continued to work which was worked upon and was worked upon further by people like the Green Monks in North London, which was Tamo, or Analog as he became known, and Herod Gabriel and Brother Sebastian. It's also been worked on by Brand Collingwood, and there was also some work done on the system and various scripts around this by Richard Gardner and Magenta Wise as well. So anyway, this is the system which I'm really interested in, and which has really had a big impact on my life. And Analog, one way or another, has really sort of like had an enormous influence on my life. So anyway, this is the system. Just to recap what I covered so far. We looked at the 12 archetypes, which are combinations of 2 elements each. And they're arranged in a circle, and you'll see that if you look at this, there are 4 cardinal archetypes which occupy the compass points, and then there are 4 open states and 4 closed states. And these all form a very beautifully harmonizing system. We also noted that the elements that really help each other in many ways are fire and air. They actually help and support each other, and earth and water help and support each other. And we saw that with the cardinals, for instance, the cardinal of air, which is the magician, is really helped by the cardinal of fire, which is the Jester. And similarly, the cardinal of earth, which is Mother Nature, is really helped by the cardinal of water, which is the Enchantress, and vice versa. Now we also saw that for the non-cardinals, the open and the closed state archetypes, they are arranged in 2 journeys. The open state archetypes are arranged in an inner journey, and the closed state archetypes are arranged in an outer journey, and these have to go in specific directions. The inner journey archetypes have to go in a counterclockwise direction, and the outer journey archetypes have to go in a clockwise direction. If you go in the other direction, they don't work properly. Now, we also looked at a few things, and we saw that there are helping relationships between various archetypes. And we saw that these basically existed between the open and closed states, the ones that we saw delineated. And we noted that for an archetype to find its supporting archetype, the archetype it's looking for, it has to share its second element, and while its first element has to be complementary to its first element. And we illustrated that with things like the warrior and the sage, and with the matriarch and the child or nymph or angel. So that's a lot of what we did last time, yeah? Now, then we had a look at the cardinals, and, well, what did we find for the cardinals? Because they're a bit different. They're entirely monogendered in terms of their constituent elements, you know, all masculine or all feminine, unlike all of the other archetypes which have a mixture. And well, what we saw was that really, again, it confirms that what really supports them is the opposite same gender cardinal, as we said before. So that does seem to do it. But we also said that I said I had a feeling that how the sort of like the reconciliation between the masculine and feminine cardinals, between the vertical and the horizontal axis, the actual reconciliation I felt came about through the circulation of energy through the whole system, and that's what I said at that point. And I have actually come to since then to think that, in a sense, I almost think of the cardinals as almost being like four hearts in the system. There are four hearts at each corner of the system, and basically the journeys and interrelationships between the archetypes are like the circulatory system in the actual wheel of life. So it's as if there are four hearts pumping away and beating away in this system, and the whole thing is moving. But the funny thing is, when I was actually narrating this last time, I actually had a little bit of a slip-up in something I said, which I noted on the video, but it was actually a funny slip-up. So let's just have a look at that and see what I said, because it's quite interesting, actually. Well, cardinals are really somewhat different in their makeup. If we looked at the rule that we used to find the helping archetype for each archetype we looked at, we found that it had to have the same second element, while the first element should be the other same gender element. So fire for water and vice versa, and air for earth and vice versa. Now, what was funny about that was, though it was a slip, it may have ended up being a Freudian slip, because it sort of suggested, or it suggested to me, that when it came to the first element, it's actually not the complementary element that the cardinal is looking for. The cardinal is actually looking for something else. So, and what I said was basically, fire's looking for water, water's looking for fire, air's looking for earth, earth is looking for air. And if you start looking that way, then you come up with a whole different pattern of things. And so that's what I'd like to look at next. Okay, let's have a look at how the cardinals might reconcile more fully, and how they might find a fuller kind of support, and also in the process illustrate some of the circulation of the energy that might be going on in the wheel of life, and I think will be going on in the wheel of life. So we'll just start with like the wheel in a nice monochrome, just as a starting point, so we can see things a little bit more clearly. And let's start with the Enchantress. So we'll bring in the Enchantress. Now, what does the Enchantress need as its support? Well, we know that it still needs, according to what we've seen so far, it's still going to need a second element archetype of Earth. So it needs an archetype that has a second element of Earth. In addition to that, with what we've just thought of, its water of first element is going to need fire. So that's what it's going to look for. Now, fire first, earth second gives you the warrior. So we have the warrior. And that would be a very interesting combination. But how about if not just that, but we also bring in the actual archetype which supports and reconciles the warrior, which is the sage. Now this gives a very similar aspect. Again, it's got earth second, but in this case, it's got air first. Now what you then have is effectively a kind of equilateral triangle. And what you have here is you have the Enchantress supported by two archetypes which themselves support each other as well. And moreover, this combination gives you all the elements here, and it connects the Enchantress to both the outer and the inner journey. So I think that is really something to think about. I think it seems to work quite elegantly. It works visually, and it makes sense in terms of the combinations. So what happens is that the Enchantress seeks fire, but it's assisted in that by having fire in a good quality, which means that it's seeking the warrior, but it's the warrior assisted by the sage, because the sage and the warrior will help each other and balance each other out and do good for each other and give you a better quality of fire and a better quality of air, and that's what the Enchantress needs. Okay, so that's one. Now then, if we go on to the Jester is again going to need a common second element, in this case the element of air, and its first element of fire is going to look for water. Water first, air second, gives you the child, the nymph. But if we then go over to the supporting archetype for the child, which the Jester can also relate to, we get the Matriarch. Here again, air second. But what we have first is earth, which is the complement for the child. So the Jester seeks the child. It's a very, very harmonious relationship, really. They're both very, very playful. But for the Jester to have that, he needs water in a good condition. And he gets water in a good condition by having it supported by earth. So in this case, what he gets is both the child, nymph, and the matriarch. So this again forms an equilateral triangle, and again we have the cardinal of fire seeking water, but he seeks water that's supported by earth, and does this with this particular kind of arrangement. And in this way again, he has a connection to both the outer and the inner journeys. If we go on to the magician is the cardinal of air, and he's air and fire. He needs a supporting archetype which has the same second element as him, in other words fire. But he also needs a first element which is like his complete opposite. So in this case he's got air, so he needs earth. So he needs earth and fire, which gives you the Hearth Priestess, the queen, the slave, the mother, whatever you want to call her. I call her the Hearth Priestess. So the magician needs the Hearth Priestess. However, he doesn't just need that earth, he needs earth in a good condition. He's the cardinal of air. He needs earth in a good condition. He needs a happy earth. Now, that means the earth needs to be supported, and what earth is supported by is water. And in this case, it's the other fire second archetype of the actress. In other words, water and fire. And that gives you another equilateral triangle, which gives the magician access to all the elements. All the elements come together in this, and he gets earth and water supporting each other, but with fire second. And lastly, let's go on to Mother Nature. Mother Nature, which is earth and water. She needs an archetype to support her, which has got water second. Meanwhile, her earth is seeking air. So that means she's going to go for air and water, which is the Patriarch. However, she is the cardinal of earth. She needs air in good condition. And so what she's going to do is she's going to get air supported. Now, what supports the Patriarch? What supports the Patriarch is the full, which is fire and water. So again, air supports fire, Patriarch supports full, and vice versa. They both have water second. This gives Mother Nature this equilateral triangle again, which takes into account all of the elements and gives Mother Nature air and fire supporting each other, with water as their common basis. And this also allows involvement and access to both the inner and the outer journeys. So in this way, the energy of all of the archetypes gets supported. The cardinals all get supported, but what they get supported by is two archetypes rather than just one, very obviously. So they get supported by two, and that way they take into account both the masculine and the feminine and all of the elements as well, which is what you need as well. So they get all of these things, and they get to plug into both the inner and the outer journeys. Okay, I hope that's fairly clear. It's a little bit of a thing to sort of like to illustrate it. But just to end, let's just see what all of the trines together look like, because I guess this is kind of more of a picture of life, really. So here we have it, and as you can see, it's beautiful. Aren't we pretty? Yes, there you go. So, but just to finish, these are not the only ways that the archetypes can interact. Obviously, any of the archetypes can interact with any others, and any archetype expressing positively can form positive relationships with anything else. It's not that these are the only ways that things can work. These are just the ways that I can see that the energy patterns unfold. But in real life, all sorts of wonderful things can happen. All sorts of wonderful combinations can happen, including the most unlikely ones. And you always have to be aware of that in human life, that the most unlikely combinations can sometimes be the most valuable and can throw up the most extraordinary qualities, insights, rewards, and love. Because basically it's all love at the end. This is all love in energy form, working its way out to where it wants to go. And so that's kind of like as much as I've got to say, really. Anyway, I hope that isn't too confusing. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.